When humanity finally reaches the stars, they bring something the galactic community never expected, an inexplicable bond with the universe's most dangerous predators. On a remote training station, Instructor Vek'thar has spent decades conditioning elite warriors to face the void's deadliest creatures, the six-legged apex hunters known as Riftclaws. These beasts have ended more military careers than wars, their savage nature unmatched across 20 star systems. But everything Vek'thar knows about survival shatters when Terra sends their first recruit, a woman whose very presence defies every protocol, every safeguard, every logical assumption about how predators and prey interact. What happens next will force the Instructor to question whether humans are the galaxy's newest members, or something far more terrifying. Listen, I have trained soldiers from 43 different species, trained them to survive, to kill, to walk away from encounters that would liquefy your internal organs just from the stress hormones alone. I have seen bravery, stupidity, and everything in between, but never, and I mean absolutely never in my 217 rotations of service, have I witnessed what happened the day the human arrived. The transport pod hissed open at 0600 station time, standard procedure. We were expecting trainee designation 792 from the recently contacted Terra, a planet that somehow managed to evolve persistence predators with delusions of civilization. The briefing packet said the human female stood at 1.68 meters, massed 63 kilograms, and possessed the typical human stubbornness that apparently passed for a survival trait among their species. What the briefing packet did not mention was the smile. She stepped onto the platform wearing the standard issue grey jumpsuit, dark hair pulled back in what I later learned humans call a ponytail, and she was grinning. Actually grinning. Like she had just been invited to a mating festival instead of a facility where 3 trainees died last cycle alone. "Morning," she called out, her voice carrying that bizarre human enthusiasm. "I'm Kai Storm. Yes, that's my real name. No, my parents weren't joking, and yes, I've heard all the superhero comparisons. Where do I stow my gear?" I stared. My secondary eyelids blinked twice, an involuntary response my species developed to process unexpected stimuli. Beside me, Junior Instructor Plix made a gurgling sound that translated roughly to profound confusion. "Trainee Storm," I said, remembering my 3 decades of professional military bearing. "Welcome to Outpost Sentinel-9. I'm Instructor Vek'thar, and I will be overseeing your conditioning program for Riftclaw combat protocols. You will address me as Instructor or Sir. You will follow every directive without hesitation, and you will absolutely, under no circumstances, treat this facility like a vacation destination. Are we clear?" The smile got wider, somehow. "Crystal, Instructor, sir. So when do I meet the murder cats?" Murder cats. She called them murder cats. The Riftclaws, apex predators responsible for 17 colony abandonments, creatures whose scientific designation roughly translates to void-born death incarnate, and this human called them murder cats. "Trainee, the Riftclaws are not pets. They are instruments of warfare, biological weapons maintained at this facility for the express purpose of training military personnel in extreme survival scenarios. They have killed more sentients than most planetary conflicts. They do not bond. They do not submit. And they certainly do not respond to cutesy nicknames." I straightened my dorsal plates, a posture meant to convey absolute authority. "You will observe them from behind reinforced barriers during your first phase, which lasts approximately 30 rotations. After that, if you survive the preliminary conditioning, you might be allowed within the same spatial zone under heavy sedation protocols." K. Storm looked at me with those disturbingly forward-facing eyes humans possess, the kind that mark them as pursuit predators on their own evolutionary ladder. "Right. 30 rotations. That's like a month-ish? Cool. But hypothetically speaking, what if they, liked me?" Plix made that gurgling sound again. "Trainee, that question demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of predator psychology that concerns me greatly about your species' readiness for galactic integration." I gestured toward the western corridor. "Plix will show you to your quarters. Orientation begins at 0800. Do not be late. She snapped off what I assumed was meant to be a salute, grabbed her kit, and followed Plix down the corridor while humming something that sounded vaguely like human music. I watched her go, feeling that peculiar sensation my species experiences when the universe is about to violently correct your assumptions. I should have trusted that feeling. The next morning, she arrived at the observation deck exactly on time, which was already suspicious. In my experience, species with lower threat assessment scores, humans ranked a depressing 4 out of 12 on the scale, tended to be either early or catastrophically late. On time suggested planning, and planning suggested she was taking this seriously. Then she pulled out a bag of something crunchy and started eating it while watching the Riftclaws through the reinforced transparent aluminum barrier. "Are those snacks?" I asked, my voice climbing an octave against my will. "Pretzels," she said cheerfully, offering the bag. "Want some? They're good. Salty. This is a combat observation session, not a recreational viewing experience." "Right. But it's also like, what? 7 in the morning station time." "Breakfast is important, Instructor sir. Peak performance requires proper nutrition." She crunched another pretzel while leaning closer to the barrier. "Oh wow, they're gorgeous. Look at those muscle structures. How fast can they move?" "Fast enough to bisect you before your nervous system registered pain," I said flatly. The Riftclaw designated Unit 12, the large male in the center, once killed 4 security officers in under 6 seconds. They had training, they had weapons, they had years of experience. "But like," she said, tilting her head in that unsettling human way, "what made Unit 12 angry enough to do that?" "Because in my experience, most predators don't attack unless they're scared, territorial, or hangry. Was someone messing with his food?" I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. The Riftclaw does not experience emotional states comparable to fear or hunger-based irritability, I finally managed. It operates on pure predatory instinct and territorial aggression. Everything with a nervous system experiences emotional states. Instructor? She pressed one hand against the barrier, still munching pretzels with the other. They just express them differently. See how Unit 12 keeps positioning himself between the smaller ones and the barrier? That's protective behavior. And the one on the left, the female with the darker stripes, she's showing submissive posturing to the juvenile near the feeding station. These aren't mindless killing machines. They're a family group. They are weapons. Trainee Storm. They're living things who got drafted into your military-industrial complex without a say in the matter, she said quietly. And for the first time since arriving, the smile disappeared. Kind of like most soldiers, actually. Before I could formulate a response that would reassert proper hierarchical dynamics, alarms started blaring. Red emergency lighting flooded the observation deck. Plix burst through the eastern entrance, all 6 of his limbs flailing in panic. Breach in Section 7. The Cubs. The Cubs got through the secondary containment. They are loose in the training quadrant. Cubs. 4 juvenile Riftclaws, each one weighing approximately 40 kilograms of teeth, claws and 0 impulse control. They had never encountered humans before. They had been born in captivity, trained to view any unfamiliar species as either prey or threat. Kay Storm was already running toward the corridor, before I could stop her. "Trainee, halt!" She did not halt. She sprinted toward the breach point like her homeworld had gravity twice what it actually did, moving with that disturbing human endurance that made them effective persistence hunters. I followed, my own legs pumping, dorsal plates rattling with acceleration stress. We rounded the corner into Section 7's main training floor. 4 Riftclaw cubs, young enough that their stripes had not fully darkened, stood in a loose cluster near the equipment storage. They were hissing, pupils dilated, haunches tensed for flight or fight. Standard panic response for displaced juveniles in an unfamiliar environment. Kay Storm walked directly toward them. Not ran, walked, slowly, steadily, hands visible at her sides. "Trainee, those creatures will tear you apart," I hissed through the facility comms. "Return to the observation station immediately." She ignored me. Of course she did. The largest cub, probably the dominant of the litter, lowered into an attack crouch. Its muscles coiled like biological springs. Death was maybe 3 seconds away, and then Kai Storm sat down. Just sat. Right there on the training floor, legs crossed, hands resting on her knees. She made a sound, soft and rhythmic, something between a hum and a purr. The cub's ears flicked forward. "Hey there," Kai said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know you were scared. New place, weird smells, strange tall things sitting in front of you, but check it out. I am sitting down, which makes me smaller and less threatening, and I am making friendly noises, which in my culture means I think you are pretty cool, and also I am not planning to eat you." The cub tilted its head. Then, and I will replay this moment in my neural pathways until I cease functioning, it took one step forward, then another. Then it closed the distance and pressed its massive head against Kai Storm's shoulder. The other 3 cubs followed. Within 30 seconds, all 4 juvenile Riftclaws were clustered around the human, making that deep rumbling sound they produced when comfortable. One of them flopped onto its back, exposing its vulnerable belly in a display of complete trust. Another started grooming Kai's hair with its rough tongue. She looked up at me, and the smile was back. "So," she said, "about that hypothetical." The emergency response team arrived approximately 45 seconds later, which was 44 seconds too late to do anything useful. They burst through the access doors in full tactical gear, stun weapons charged, sedation darts loaded, ready to execute Protocol Omega-7, which basically meant kill everything and ask questions during the incident review board. I held up one manipulator appendage in the universal gesture for stop, because if they fired into that cluster of cubs and human, paperwork alone would consume the rest of my natural lifespan. "Stand down," I said through the comm system. "Situation is contained." The team leader, a Thoraxian named Grimm, who had survived 2 actual wars and 1 really bad cafeteria food poisoning incident, stared at the scene before him. "Instructor, my visual sensors must be malfunctioning. It appears the human trainee is cuddling with the breach subjects. Your sensors are functioning perfectly, which is unfortunately the problem." Kai Storm glanced up from where she was now scratching behind the ears. Did Riftclaws even have proper ears? Of the largest cub. "Hey everyone, false alarm. These guys just wanted to explore." Totally normal behavior for juveniles in a restricted environment. Poor babies probably just needed some enrichment activities and social contact. "Poor babies," Grimm repeated, his translator struggling with the tonal disbelief in his voice. "Trainee, those poor babies eviscerated a reinforced steel barrier to escape containment. Because they were bored and understimulated," Kai said, like she was explaining basic mathematics to a particularly slow student. "Look, I get it. You all treat them like weapons instead of intelligent creatures with psychological needs. But these guys are smart, way smarter than your protocols account for. They need mental stimulation, social structures, environmental complexity. Locking them in blank rooms with nothing to do except fight simulation drones, that is basically torture." I felt my respiratory spiracles constrict. "Trainee Storm, you have been at this facility for approximately 14 station hours. In that time you have managed to violate 6 different safety regulations, 3 security protocols, and possibly my sanity. You do not have the expertise, the training, or frankly the survival instinct that basic biology should have provided to lecture this facility on Riftclaw management." She looked at me with those predator eyes. "Instructor, sir, with respect, I spent 6 years working at the Serengeti Conservation Complex back on Terra. I have handled lions, Cape buffalo, leopards, hippos, and one really grumpy honey badger named Gerald, who once chased a research vehicle for 3 kilometers because someone looked at him wrong. Before that, I did 2 years in the Amazon rainforest recovery zone, working with jaguars. I understand apex predators, and more importantly, I understand that apex predators are still just animals trying to survive in whatever environment they find themselves in." "The Serengeti," I said slowly. "The Amazon. Those are locations on Terra. Yeah, we had a bit of a climate and ecosystem collapse situation a few decades back. Humans nearly ruined the whole planet. Real embarrassing. Anyway, we spent a lot of time and resources fixing it, and part of that meant reintroducing predators to environments where we had killed them all off. Turns out predators are actually super important for ecological balance. Who knew? She grinned. Besides us, eventually, one of the cubs made a chirping sound and batted at her hand with a paw the size of a dinner plate. She laughed and redirected its attention to a piece of equipment nearby, which it immediately began investigating with intense focus. "You are telling me," I said, trying to organize my thoughts into something resembling professional military analysis, "that your species nearly destroyed your own planet, then fixed it, and the fixing process involved deliberately working with creatures that wanted to eat you. Well, they did not really want to eat us specifically. We are kind of bony and wear too many synthetic fabrics. But yeah, basically." She stood up slowly, carefully, not making any sudden movements that might startle the cubs. "Look, Instructor, I know how this looks. Weird human shows up, immediately befriends your supposedly untrainable murder beasts, makes everyone question their life choices. But here is the thing, humans are persistence predators who evolved alongside really impressive megafauna. We learned a long time ago that understanding predators is way more effective than just fearing them. And significantly more dangerous," I pointed out. "Oh, absolutely, super dangerous. Statistically speaking, working with large predators has like a 73% injury rate over a 10-year career span." But she held up one finger. "Those same predators, when properly understood and managed, become conservation success stories instead of extinction statistics. We did not save Terra's ecosystem by killing everything scary. We saved it by figuring out how to coexist." The cubs were now playing with various pieces of training equipment, exhibiting behaviors I had never observed in captive Riftclaws. Curiosity, playfulness, social bonding with each other instead of just hierarchical dominance displayed. Grim moved closer, still maintaining a safe distance, but clearly fascinated, despite himself. "How did you know they would not attack you?" "I did not. Not for sure anyway. But their body language was all wrong for an actual attack. They were scared and disoriented, not aggressive. Plus, I made myself non-threatening by sitting down and using calming vocalizations. Most mammals, and these guys are at least mammal-adjacent based on the whole warm-blooded thing with fur, most mammals respond to tone and body language more than they respond to species identification. Most mammals," I said, "are not engineered killing machines bred for combat effectiveness across 17 generations." Kai looked at me, and for the first time I saw something other than cheerful confidence in her expression, something harder, older. "Instructor, with all due respect, that is exactly the problem. You have taken natural predators and tried to turn them into weapons, but you forgot that weapons do not have psychological needs. Animals do, and when you ignore those needs, you get violence, trauma and systems that fail catastrophically." She gestured at the cubs. "These guys are not broken. Your protocols are." Silence filled the training floor. Even the cubs seemed to pause their exploration, sensing the tension. Then Plix, who had been observing from the doorway with what I recognized as his species' version of absolute shock, spoke up. "The human might have a valid point, Instructor. Our incident reports over the past 4 cycles show increasing aggression levels, stress behaviors and containment failures. The current protocols were designed by the Military Science Division based on threat modeling, not behavioral psychology." "Because they are weapons," I said, but my conviction was eroding faster than a hull breach in hard vacuum. "They were supposed to be weapons," Kai corrected gently, "but somewhere along the way, someone forgot they were living things first. And living things need more than just food and fight training. They need purpose, enrichment, social structures." She walked over to me, moving with that peculiar human grace that came from a species that used to chase prey across endless plains. "Let me help, please. I can show you what I am. Give me 30 rotations like you originally planned, but let me work with them my way. If it fails, you can document it as proof that human methods are ineffective and send me back to Terra with a polite note about how we are not ready for galactic integration. But if it works, I said slowly, it means everything we thought we knew about Riftclaw management was wrong." "Yeah," she agreed, But you strike me as someone who cares more about being effective than being right. Am I wrong about that? I stared at her. At the cubs, who were now play-fighting with each other using behaviors that looked suspiciously like joy. At my facility, which had operated on the same protocols for 47 cycles, despite mounting evidence that something was fundamentally broken. 30 rotations, I said finally, but you work under direct supervision. You document everything, and if anyone gets injured, yourself included, the experiment ends immediately. Understood? The smile returned. Understood, Instructor, sir. You will not regret this. I am already regretting this, Trainee Storm. The question is whether I will survive the regret long enough to learn anything useful from it. She laughed, and the sound echoed through the training facility, like nothing I had ever heard there before. Hope? Maybe. Or possibly just the universe's sense of humor expressing itself through the most unlikely species imaginable. The cubs responded to her laugh by making their own vocalizations, high-pitched chirps that their species used for social bonding. One of them, the smallest female, broke away from the group and trotted over to me. She sat down approximately 2 meters away, head tilted, watching me with eyes that held considerably more intelligence than our briefing documents suggested was possible. She wants to know if you are part of the family now, Kai said softly. Riftclaws are pack animals. Instructor, they have been trying to tell you that for cycles. You just were not listening. I looked at the cub, at Kai Storm, at the future of this facility, which had suddenly become far more complicated and infinitely more interesting than I had planned when I woke up that morning. Well, I said, my voice carrying only slightly more uncertainty than I preferred. I suppose we should start listening then. And that, as the humans say, was when everything changed.